welcome back for episode 24 of Focus Fire Chat and episode 2 of our Extra Lore series, recorded live on March 30th, 2016 on twitch.tv. A big shout out to the chat here. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have a man who has found his calling in humorous storytelling, Justin Sane 0516.
Heyo.
We also have tricked Mel, known to many as Wind of the Stars, into returning to discuss tonight's topic. Welcome back, Mel.
Hi, guys. I must really like you if I'm back for more punishment, right?
Yay!
Is this like running the hard mode, like again on Destiny? Oh wait, we're not talking about Destiny tonight. My bad.
It that much? Is it that much of a beating?
No, I'm just joking.
The topic of today's chat is going to be a discussion on the basic storyline of the Elder Scroll games. Before we get into that, however, I do want to just run through some quick notes. Our last chat covered the Weapons of Sorrow. If you missed that and have any interest in hearing our thoughts, please be sure to check out www.focusfirechat.com for archives of all previous chats, as well as links to all our various other pages. If you don't mind, please also give us some feedback on iTunes or through our email, focusfirechat@gmail.com, to let us know how we're doing. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Wednesday at about 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. Next week's chat is going to be a discussion about the Black Garden from within Destiny. With that, let's go ahead and dive into the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe. So what we mostly covered in chat was pretty much just a basic covering of the timeline. We didn't really get into any specific details until the later game, which is Skyrim. We got a little bit into some of the Oblivion stuff because that's when most of us are console gamers, so that's pretty much what a lot of us were exposed to, was especially Skyrim and then some Oblivion for the 360. And so what figure we'll do is we'll run through a very quick overview of the geography that is in the Elder Scrolls, and then a very, very, very brief touch on the timeline with a little bit more emphasis on the later areas of the timeline, the later years, which is when the latest games came out, or the latest main games came out. We'll try to put into perspective also where most of the games that many people are familiar with, which is basically the main games, and then also Elder Scrolls Online, which actually is not a Bethesda game. It has Bethesda's name, but it's not considered a main title. So we'll talk a little bit about the placement of those games within there, and then we're also going to talk about, with the obvious, as an RPG, there's some playable races, and we might get into a little bit of conversation on a couple of those, because I know one of us has a particular favorite. So,
Yay!
So just real quick, a basic geography. So the thing to remember about Elder Scrolls is that it's not just a physical reality, it's also a supernatural reality, and there are three main what they identify as realms, and those three are Aetherius, Oblivion, and Mundus. Now, the game that you play predominantly takes place on Mundus, and that is what that translates into is the mortal realm, and where that takes place is on a planet called Nirn. Nirn is basically the Earth of Mundus. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that each of these... So in Mundus, there are things called planes or spheres. Each of those spheres are associated with a planet. And there's a couple of them, but we're going to focus on Nirn because that's where the entire game world is focused on. Now, on Nirn, there are also a number of continents and a number of bodies of... basically continents, and these all kind of just roll into, predominantly the game that we all experience with Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind, which are the three main ones that many people know, take place on the continent of Tamriel, and they're in different provinces, but it's mostly on Tamriel. However, it is good to know the other areas on Nirn. And those other areas are Akavir. And I'm just going to run through the names. There's not a lot known about most of these places. So Akavir, and the main thing to know about Akavir is that this is supposedly the home of the dragons. So this is where dragons came from, as well as a number of what is identified as the beast races. The next one is Aldmaris, and the important thing about Aldmaris is that we know next to nothing in game lore terms. The Altmer, which is a race that we'll get into a little bit later, say that this was the birthplace of both elves and mankind, but we don't even in the game know if this land even still exists. It could be destroyed or gone. And so there's that one. And then we have Atmora, which is, we know that it's a barren and freezing wasteland, and it is the extreme cold that caused the water of the Sea of Ghosts, which basically borders Tamriel and Atmora, to become a basically a field of ice. And so this is the more northern areas. And then there's a giant body of water that covers most of the continent, or most of the planet, called the Padomaic Ocean. Now, this is the ocean that separates all these continents, and so there's a little bit of exposure to that as within the game. Then we have the continent of Pyandonia, and this one is an island continent that is located actually to the southwest of Tamriel. Now, remember, we're kind of centering on Tamriel, so it's the southwest of Tamriel, and this is the home of a race of sea elves, and which we'll get into that a little bit later. Tamriel, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, is the main focus, but then we also have Thrace, which is also known as the Coral Kingdom, and we know that there's a race called the Slode. Again, get into the races a little bit, but the Slode may be from here. And then there's the last one that we know about is it's Yokuda. And again, not much is known about Yokuda, since this one actually we do know it was nearly obliterated in a cataclysmic event, but it also is supposedly the original home to the race of humans called the Red Guards, which is one of the 10 playable races in Elder Scroll. Now, we're going to go back up to Tamriel. Tamriel is it's a very, very interesting continent geographically. It has mountains, tundras, cold deserts, hot deserts, swampy regions, grasslands, tropical rainforest, and even arguably a very large volcano. And the diversity of these biomes is very, very unique, obviously, and they're bordered. I mean, they're kind of smashed all in together, so it's very, very confusing at times. The Altmer, which is an elven race, call this continent Dawn's Beauty. And there's also an archipelago of islands called the Somerset Isles, which is the home of the High Elves, which are the Altmer. And then this became their home after they abandoned their original homeland, which was that Aldmaris continent that we just talked about. Now, the thing about Tamriel is, politically, this place is pretty diverse. Anyone who's played any of the Elder Scroll games knows that political intrigue is almost as big of a deal as the actual martial aspect of the RPG. You, especially in the later games, you can choose whether or not to join guilds. You can choose which factions to support. You can choose political alliances to promote and, other ones to attack. It just depends on which way your character, you want to go. And these political factions and political guilds all stem primarily around the separation of what's called provinces. Now, provinces are pretty much tied to geographical differences within the continent. Now, this continent is pretty massive. And just to run through, again, just real quick run through. We have the Black Marshes, which is mostly in the southeastern tip. So this is a very southern point. And it's basically swamps and thick brush. There's not a lot there that's not very swampy. Then you have the main continent, or the main province, which is called Cyrodiil. Cyrodiil is basically the center of Tamriel, and this is it's the basis of a lot of the games. So there is a lot known about Cyrodiil, and a lot happens in Cyrodiil, especially, you know, later in the timeline. This is where a lot of the story within the main games takes place. After Cyrodiil, we will talk about Elsewhere, which is a more northern province. We don't know much about Elsewhere other than the fact that it is the home of the Khajiit, which are the cat people, which is another one of the playable races. And then we come to Hammerfell, which Hammerfell actually is very interesting, especially later in the timeline, as well as it is the setting for Daggerfall, which was the second Elder Scrolls game. And so this is a very a very desert-like province. It's the home of the Red Guards. And then we come to High Rock, which is the home to the Britons and the Orcs, which are also called the Orsimer. And this is actually a province that's divided into multiple city-states and minor kingdoms. It's a temperate coastal region, and it is also the setting of the third game in the Elder Scrolls series, which is called Daggerfall. So that is High Rock, and then we come to Morrowind, which most of us will probably recognize that name. The third game of the Elder Scrolls is actually Morrowind, and there's a city or an area in there called Solstium, which is the setting for Morrowind, as well as the two add-ons, which are Blood Moon and Blood Moon and Tribunal. Sorry, blanked on that one. This province is in the northeast corner. So this is, you know, again, Cyrodiil is in the middle. All these things ring around it. After Morrowind, we have Skyrim, which many console players and most people who are into Elder Scrolls will recognize, because this is the most recent main title that has been released, Elder Scrolls V. And like I said, when we get into timeline, some of these provinces are going to become very, very important to remember. So then we come to Somerset Isles, which is those little islands that are located in what's called the Elthric Ocean. I don't really remember most of the Somerset because there's not a lot of them in the games, other than the fact that they are the home to the Altmer. And then finally we have Valenwood. And Valenwood is it's a southwestern region of Tamriel. And this is pretty much the home to the Bosmer, which are also known as the Wood Elves. So, again, sorry, we ran through those really fast. And the reason why is, you know, just to kind of give you a sense of just how enormous this game world is. It's a massive game world. Put it in perspective of, you know, the other game that we all talk about, Destiny. Elder Scrolls has an extremely established lore. And the other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, Destiny has a big timeline. Elder Scrolls has an enormous timeline similar to Halo. It's got such a large timeline that we actually have it segregated into different eras. And we'll talk on those in just a second. The other two realms that I do want to touch on just real quick are Aetherius and Oblivion. Now, these are important, especially Oblivion, because Oblivion is actually another realm that as players we're able to interact with. This is kind of a spiritual realm to the physical realm of Mundus. Oblivion is the home of entities known as the Daedric Princes. We know 16 of the Daedric Princes. Supposing there potentially could be more, but we know of 16 from the game. And we can... Do you guys want to run through those, or feel like I might be bludgeoning people?
No. This is good stuff.
We can run through it. I feel like the Daedric Princes are kind of important because you do interact a lot with them in the game. And you do get a lot of actual lore interacting with them. Like one of my favorite interactions is with Sheogorath. So
Yes,
anytime we talk about him, I get really excited. So
yeah, Sheogorath is a fun one. So real fast. The 16 known Daedric princes, and this is just going to be alphabetical, so no emphasis on anybody, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of these names. So first we have Azura, and then we have okay, so each of these Daedric princes, you have to, let me take a step back. Daedra, and let's explain Daedra. Let me pull this up real fast. Daedra, as opposed to Aedra, are two variations of supernatural entities that are interacting with Mundus. Aedra is a word that means our ancestors, and so these are the best way to separate these are Aedra create. They create realms, they create things, and they created Mundus. However, as part of that process, they lost a lot of their divine power, and they became tied to Mundus in a way that if they leave or if they stop interacting or stop creating, they actually will pass. They will actually, die. And one of the cases of that is an Aedra called Lorcan, which we'll touch briefly on in the timeline concept. But Lorcan actually is a very important Aedra in that he actually tricked the others into creating Mundus, and then he gave himself up, and his body actually became Nirn. Now, Aedra also, the reason that they're called our ancestors is because there is a segment of Aedra that actually became Mer and Man.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the topic or the concept of our ancestor comes from. Daedra, on the other hand, Daedra change. They change things. They don't create. They take what's already been created and they manipulate it and change it. So when Daedra so technically Daedra are less powerful than Aedra, but within the realm of the games that we experience, they are actually sometimes more powerful because unlike the Aedra who have sacrificed themselves to create this world, Daedra didn't sacrifice anything. They just are manipulators of the environment that they are already in. So that's why the Daedra tend to be more prevalent in the games than the Aedra. Now, you'll still have mentions of the Aedra, like the Divine Nine, or the Nine Divines, and in the Imperial religion and stuff like that. There are still references, and they are still present enough to bless particular individuals. But Daedra will actually manifest and will actually go to war with the physical realms. And the most powerful of these Daedra are entities that we know as Daedric princes, and the prince title is not indicative of a gender. Daedra can appear either male or female. Actually, some of them will appear as both throughout the same game. Now, they do predominantly tend to appear one or the other, but they do have the ability to shift because they're not bound by physical laws. So the thing to keep in mind about Daedric princes is that each of these Daedric princes hold it's a patronage basically over a philosophical, or metaphysical concept or state of being, which are called spheres of power. So these are basically the pantheon of minor godlings to the Aedra's gods. And then each of these Daedric princesses within Oblivion, which is their home realm, they each have their own what's called plane or realm within there. Like I said, we know 16 of them. And those are Azura, Bothia, Clavicus Vile, Hermias of Mora, Hircine, Jigalag, which is also known as, some will know him as Sheogorath, Malakath, Mehrunes Dagon, Mephala, Meridia, Molag Bal, Namera, Nocturnal, Periite, Sanguine, and then finally Varmina. The cool thing about the Daedric Princes is that within the games, especially within Oblivion and Skyrim, you can actually, like I said, remember these princes will actually manifest in Tamriel, and you can actually appease, or you can actually, try to appease them, and they will give you what's basically a weapon of power that is associated with their name and then their particular sphere of power. So depending on, and as an RPG, you can make your character build to whatever. Some people prefer stealth, some people prefer, the blunt fighter, some people prefer magic. Each of these things has their own area of emphasis, and you can build out your equipment just same as you can build in any of these RPGs. You can build out your equipment to augment those interests. So basically, you pick the Daedric Prince that you want, that let's say Nocturnal. Nocturnal is the one I'm familiar with because I always play a more stealth type character. Nocturnal is basically the stealth goddess. And so what she does is she has weapons and equipment that augment that ability. Sheogorath is basically the god of chaos, opposed to Jigalags, which is the god of unnatural order. And so Sheogorath has the Jabberwocky, if I remember correctly. And that's a weapon that is amazingly chaotic. If I remember in Skyrim or in Oblivion, Jabberwocky was a wand or a staff that you could hit people and it would randomly transform them into something, which could range from anything. I mean, anything. It could be a rat or it could be a dragon.
Cheese.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It did actually include inanimate objects, too. Yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot that it included inanimate. Yeah, so it was kind of a role. Like, it was like, I hope you're not going to be a very, very big guy.
So is the Destiny sidearm, is that a nod to the...
No, it's more of a nod to the poem, which is the same as this one, the Jabberwocky.
Jabberwocky?
Yeah.
So just let me just real quick kind of clarify for myself. Oblivion isn't so much another place as it is another plane of existence, correct?
Correct.
So the Daedra and the Aedra are actually beings from this alternate dimension, or do you even want to call it a dimension?
It would be a different plane. So Daedra hail from Oblivion, and Aedra hail from Aetherius. And the thing about Aetherius is we in the game have never been. I'm thinking, hang on, let me make sure. I don't think we've actually ever been.
Yeah, but we have encountered Aedra.
Hang on, false.
No?
We have been to Aetherius. We've been to Sovngarde in Skyrim. So it's basically the afterlife that all the beings. It's like heaven, and Oblivion is usually attributed to hell.
To hell, yeah. So, that's how I've always mentally kind of done it. Like Oblivion's hell, Aetherius is heaven, and Mundus is our plane of existence.
Right. So and the reason I'm asking this question is because I'm always trying to reconcile story in terms of good and evil,
right?
And moving in a direction of the primary struggle that pushes forth the narrative. So would you say that Daedra are agents of, I don't even want to say the darkness just because of all the...
No, Daedra...
all the batshit connotations there, but...
Daedra are amoral.
Okay. I can
there's some Pyrite and Nocturnal and even Sheogorath to a degree.
Well, transcend
they just don't care.
Petty moral
they don't care. Azura will do that too. Azura will actually help people, not out of the goodness, but I mean it's very much like the Godfather type situation. You know, they do you a favor, you do them a favor, you owe them a favor.
Yes.
And as characters, you are taking on the role of extreme prophesized individuals. So your character is someone of extreme importance within the realm of Mundus. And so these Daedric princes are always trying to manipulate you into doing something that would further their cause, even though it also actually tends to end up hurting them in the long run. Like the one that really strikes me is Molag Bal. Because he's a
I was
He's an
he
a-hole. But
Yeah, I was gonna say if the only one that I can recall being absolute just evil is Molag Bal because he was, I think, one of the only ones that wanted. It's like, hey, I want Mundus for myself, and I'm gonna go in there and take it. So, but I guess, if you want to say if anyone is like the devil main antagonist for one specific type of game, it would be Molag Bal.
yeah, or
So,
Mehrunes. Mehrunes is Oblivion. And the reason why that is because Mehrunes is the Prince of Destruction. His entire purpose is destruction. And so, whereas Molag wants to take Mundus for himself, Mehrunes just wants to destroy it. Like, he just wants to eat it. And that's actually the entire main story of Oblivion is you are the person who is supposed to stand up to him. And that is the last fight in Oblivion. Spoilers, is you and the last surviving heir of the Septim dynasty stopping the invasion of Oblivion that was orchestrated by the Prince of Destruction. Because he opens up all these Oblivion gates around Tamriel, and your job is to basically run around the entire country and close all these gates. And the way you close them is you have to run in and destroy the entire countryside of Oblivion to get to these, I guess they're towers. Wasn't that what they were? They were these giant towers that you had to destroy the heart of, and that would basically implode these pocket transport universes that he was creating. So Mehrunes and Molag were kind of they're really the only two, though. I mean, it's really hard to put morality on the Daedric princes because they just don't care. They really don't.
Yeah.
Aedra are creators, so they care about their creation to a degree. There are some Aedra who are not very nice, but they actually, they do care in a way about what they've created. But the Daedra, like I said, Daedras are changers, and they didn't create it, so they don't really have that attachment.
Well, could you say they care about it or they're invested in it?
They are invested in it insofar as it benefits them.
Yeah, they're very
they're amoral. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very self-motivated. Like, whatever will work for them and whatever gets them to whatever their goal is at that time, that's what they're going to do. And if you happen to be mortal and you're there to give them a helping hand on their objective, then they're going to use you. So
I think the thing we usually kind of the stumbling block whenever we talk good versus evil is the idea that morals are universal. Unnatural. Well, they're unnatural. If you think about the natural world,
right.
How many morals does a pack of wolves have? They don't,
and that's true.
And
morals is a very humanistic.
It runs counter to survival instinct in a lot of cases. It'll directly contradict what would be best for your own survival is the concept of what is moral. So yeah, I'm getting a better picture now of the Daedra and the Aedra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is like, even like I was kind of saying, even Aedra are to a degree amoral. Like they're not. I hesitate to call them amoral because, like, again, their entire basis of being is to create, and so but there's not a moral imperative in them. If they're just doing what they were created to do in a way, whereas the Daedra are doing the same thing. They're just mixing the cards up. It's two aspects, and really the juxtaposition between Jiggalag and Sheogorath really kind of show that off, because Sheogorath is pretty much 100% chaos and just insanity and all this craziness, whereas Jiggalag is the complete opposite, like unnatural order. Everything has its place, and anything that steps out of line is destroyed and ground down. And so that was actually the Shivering Isles expansion was actually the entire purpose of that, was you became the next Sheogorath by kind of there's a big story that Jiggalag, it's just such a weird name.
Stupid name.
It's spelled really weird. So Jigalag he was so obsessed with order that he pissed off the other Daedric princes. The other princes are actually scared of him because what he represents is complete and utter unnatural order. There is no movement. There is no, hey, I'm gonna get one up on you and get more powerful than you, because your place is your place is your place, and that's all. There's no growth. There is no change. It is just a perfect machine constantly running. And so the princes actually teamed up one of the few times that these other Daedric princes actually worked in cohesive, tandem with one another, and they collectively cursed him to become Sheogorath. And Sheogorath, is the exact opposite of Jigalag. He's completely insane. His entire plane of existence is actually divided into dementia and hang on real quick. It's mania and dementia, and it's called the madhouse is what his realms are called, or the asylums, which the Daedra call it. And the mania is the fantastic, colorful side where, you have your insane revelers and your art enthusiasts. And then dementia is this horrible, dark, and ominous planet or plane that's inhabited with just basically horror stories. And there is a process in which, I think let me check real quick. Yeah, so Jigalag is able to manifest himself periodically through what's called the Grey March. And he tries to, during this time period, it's like this whole cyclical prophecy. And he tries to reorganize everything. And ultimately he fails and he reverts back to Sheogorath. And that was the entire point, like I said, of the Shivering Isles DLC, was you basically break this curse and set Jigalag free, and then kill him. And then you take on the role of Sheogorath in the game. So, but that all being said, so that's it's a very, as a disclaimer, this chat was extremely tough because there is so much information. I mean, you can literally, each one of the main games has libraries and libraries of actual books within the game that you could spend years reading.
I'd like to also add to that we're not used to having a lot of information.
Easily accessed information on top of that.
I'm not used to having an outline of all the characters and their grandfathers and their offspring, and then where their home addresses were and where I could reach them on Skype. And I'm not used to having all that, so that's new. That's a new one for me. So yeah, this story reads like a novel. Destiny reads like a comic book.
Short story.
Serial. It reads like a serial, something that I'm expecting to be completed at some point, but not right this moment.
Right. It's like comparing a short story to Tolkien.
Yes.
And that's absolutely not a dig at Destiny. It's not. You have to understand that Destiny is only in year 2 of its existence, whereas Elder Scrolls is, Lord, I can't even remember not having Elder Scrolls, to be completely honest. We're on game 5 of the main series, and just on a real brief glance, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11, 12 spin-offs.
And I know I've been playing online for a lot, and there's so much lore in online. It's insane.
The weird thing about online though is it's actually taking place before all the other games.
Yeah.
Which is really bizarre to me, but it's kind of cool. But I'm I remember reading some of the lore in online. I'm like, what? This person's dead. What is going? Because I'm comparing it to Skyrim and Oblivion, which are my main, my favorites. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I started looking at the times, and I was like, oh, this is taking place in the Second Era. This is not. And Skyrim takes place in 4th, and Oblivion takes place in 3rd. So with that, do you want to? Oh, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying, like, I know they market it as an MMO, but I mean, you can play it like a standard normal RPG and still have enough lore and information put into it. Like, not as much as like Skyrim, but it's up there. Like, I was really surprised at how much information and story and stuff that you get through just playing by yourself, even though it's not made to be that way. So, but anyways, just want to interject.
No, honestly, no, Mel, I'm curious. Because I'm just going to be honest. I mean, everyone listening can probably, infer this from my silence. I've never played the game. So, what are the MMO elements of this game? Like, what are the game modes that involve massively online?
Well, obviously you can run around the whole entire area and you can run into people. There's obviously your main, like the big cities. It's just like the tower on Destiny. So there's a bunch of people there. It actually has entire crafting systems and guild systems that you can access in the game. Like you don't have to go on to like a website to do it like Destiny does. So you have a bunch of different crafting, from weapons to potions to whatever, armor or weapons, whatever you want to do. And then in terms of playing online with other people, you can go and run dungeons and different missions and stuff together. And some of them you're required to actually go do. So since we're Destiny people, it's kind of like you have to go run like the raid and stuff, basically. Yeah.
So there are things like a dungeon is like the raid. Is that what
yeah, a dungeon is a little bit smaller. I would equate that to more of like a strike. And then they have longer, bigger missions that are a little take longer. They're like bigger bosses that are more like the raid. They're not as long as the raid because there's not as many like small mid-tier bosses, and then you have your final one. But they're there. So, and like I said, like a lot of them, you actually have to have a team of X amount of people before you can go in there. And in traditional MMO style, they do have classes. Like I know Destiny has classes, but you have your healer class, your DPS class, your tank class and stuff. And you need to have all of those satisfied before you go into the actual dungeons. So like, they're like, oh, you need to actually have a tank before we let you in the dungeon. So, but it's nice because you can still play most of the races that are present in the other in the other Elder Scrolls games. So I think they did a really nice job in terms of incorporating a very much one-person RPG experience into an experience that you can do with other people, which I know a lot of people really wanted. Like, hey, this would be great if I had like a buddy to go run this dungeon with, So, yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah, no, that's. That explanation of the game makes me want to play it.
Yeah,
because
bonus.
I hear MMO, I hear things like that, and I get immediately, I get intimidated because I want to put my favorite guns on. I want to shoot the mans. I don't want to get too involved with how I tied my shoes that morning. I want to roll with it, and the thought of a game where like people are going to be like, oh, like my intellect's not where it should be. And I can't do what I need to do because I'm not a level this, that. And this sounds like a much more simplified version of an MMO.
I think so, considering I've had a hard time getting into MMOs. Like I've tried to play World of Warcraft, God, years ago. I hated it. I couldn't play it. And then I played Final Fantasy, and Final Fantasy 14 was very, very overwhelming to me. And I feel like it's really hard to do anything in that game without having a clan or a team of people to actually go do stuff with. Whereas online, Elder Scrolls Online, you can definitely run through most of the game without ever having to interact with anyone if you don't want to. So but anyways, okay, let's go into the timeline here for the different eras and stuff, since we were talking about the different where the games take place and stuff. So
that's what I was thinking.
Okay, so who wants to start off here? Justin, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll take it. So the first of the eras is the prehistoric eras, and I'm gonna start with the Dawn era. It's known mostly through myth and legend, and it differs by culture, though most scholars agree that time did not exist and when it was created, it was not linear. That statement I'll come back to. An era lasted for an unknown number of years. What is an era in our reckoning?
You want to take that, Mel?
Yeah.
What do you, what is an era? Just like a time period of
yeah.
It's just how they chunk. It's just how they chunk out.
Well, I was just saying in our universe, an era is an indefinite amount of time, but it's usually marked by it's marked by a significant starting point and a significant ending point.
Right.
And it's the same here. Yeah. That becomes very prominent in the modern eras because of the events that mark the end and beginning of them. And we'll talk about there's like the last couple eras have only been a couple hundred years, whereas these earlier eras are like a couple thousand. So that is the same understanding. Yes.
Yeah. But the most significant event of the Dawn era was the creation of Mundus, which is the mortal realm, which is I'm just going to call Earth.
Pretty much.
For my purpose. In my head. You guys can. Yeah.
No, and that's pretty accurate. Mundus is basically physical. It's the physical realm is what it is. So the fun part about the Dawn era is exactly kind of, I think, what you kind of zeroed in on too, is that time was not linear at this time, or that at this point. And so,
or even marked. I don't think they were marking it or keeping track of it.
Because at this point in time, there were no mortals. It was only the Aedra and the Daedra. But actually, predominantly, there was only the Aedra at this point. And so our concept of time, that's another thing you pick up pretty quickly, is not only are these creatures immortal, they don't even really recognize the passing of time in the same way that we do. And so that's actually kind of an explanation on how they interact with our characters, and they kind of, they will make comments about your character in previous games. Not necessarily like specifics, because it's an open world, so you can do whatever you want on certain things. But for the main events that you had to accomplish, they will make comments about that, and so that's why that the time did not exist concept. That's why that in the Dawn era we don't know how long it's the creation story of this world, which will lead us into the Merithic era. And I think that one is... So the Merithic era is also largely called the Mythic era. And the majority of this era is considered to be outside of verifiable history, because humanity, or the men, so you have three different, I guess, families of species. No, I don't know how that... I'm not a biologist, so I don't know this one. But... you have three different groupings of races. You have men, mer, and beast. And men are humans. Mer are usually the elven species, or races, and then beast are your Khajiit, your Orsmir, and like your, Argonians. Those are the beast. So they're not... It's kind of the outside. And then you have a couple races who are completely outside, which it's just really annoying. But so men did not have a written language at this point until the end of this era. And so really the only records that we have are from the Aldmeri, which are the Mer, and these are the High Elves. Now, their records do date back to the beginning of the Mytheric era, so there are some records available. However, as is pretty classical in most fantasy stories, mer and men do not really get along at all. There's a lot of tension always between the elven races and the human races, for the most part. As a generic stereotype, the elven races do not like the human races for various reasons.
I maintain that that's because the elven races are really snooty.
There are, so the Aldmeri, and then there's another one called the Aeliad. Those two, yes, definitely. The High Elves and the Allied are the Allied actually enslaved humankind for a very long time, and the Aldmeri there's a reason we call them the High Elves, is because they're very, very prim and well, they're not prim and proper, but they turn their nose up at, they don't view mortals as they call men as worth their time. Which is very, very prominent in the Third Era and the events that kind of lead into the Fourth Era. The beasts kind of keep to themselves. It's like the Wood Elves, and then you have like Sea Elves, and other variations of the Mer. They're kind of just apathetic. They don't really care too much at all. But so we do have records from the Aldmeri, and in the game we kind of have some understanding of that. We do know that this era lasted for roughly 2,500 years, and unlike the other eras which counted up, this is kind of like the BC period in our world. It counted down. Now, the main events in this era was the exploration of Tamriel and the settling in of the new civilization. So this is where basically Tamriel really became the center place of Nirn, which is, again, Nirn is the planet. And so that the end of the Mytheric era is the beginning of what is the first of the modern era, which is what's simply called the First Era. And I think, Mel, I'm going to hand that off to you.
For the first era lasted about 2,900 and change years. The most important things that happened during this time was the power struggle between men and elves, which Blue just was talking about. So let's see, where do we want to dig into here? Oh my gosh, there's a lot of information. So Alessia begins, I'm going to chop up this word. How do we say that area?
This one's weird. Sidrolilic, I think.
Sidrilic? Okay, Sidrilic human uprising against the Iliad with her demigod lover, which was Morahas Breath of the Kine, and Peniel Whitestrike, which I have no clue who they are, but we're going to pretend that I do. And that happened around the First Era 242. And then after that, the White Gold Tower falls around 243, which was viewed as a symbolic end as the Iliad Empire. And at that time, the Alessa Empire of the Krylidid was officially formed, and that was known as the First Empire. Alien lordships are now outlawed as part of the Elysian doctrines of Markrul, and that happened around 361. So now we have a huge shift in power. People who were allied to the former rule was now considered as outlawed, and that's no bueno. So at which point most of the Iliad departed from the Krylidid and became absorbed into the elven population of Valenwood, which is the area where the Wood Elves live. So the powerful religions are now also born in Tamriel at this point in time. The Divine Heart also causes a terrible war, which was the first war of the console. And then this war ends with the disappearance of the once great race of Dwemer, which, if in the games, is throughout a very mysterious race. I don't know if you know anything about them, Blue, but from my research, I haven't really found anything about them.
Yeah, we talked about this in chat, and it's one of the most annoying. So for a game that has an overabundance of lore accessible to everything, there is nothing on the Dwemer. Nothing on the Dwemer. And it is one of the most, it's like, if you want to start a conspiracy conversation with someone who is Elder Scrolls nut, start talking about Dwemer, because there is absolutely no information on what caused their disappearance. And other than there's theories and there's thoughts that they decided to transcend, they decided they were done with Mundus and they just wanted to go elsewhere, but there's nothing. To back up just real quick though, on the entire shift of power from elves to man, it's entirely correct. The political structure of the the political landscape has completely flipped over at this point. The important thing to remember too is that the White Gold Tower is a very, very, very important aspect in the continent of Cyrodiil. The White Gold Tower is actually never fully destroyed, and it actually becomes the center of the entire entire province. And Alyssa actually takes up her empire. Actually, is seated in the Imperial City. And the Imperial City is so Cyrodiil is the center province of Tamriel. Imperial City is the center of Cyrodiil. It's like the most central point of Tamriel. It is in the heartland of Tamriel. And so in the White Gold Tower is basically the center of Imperial. I mean, it's symbolically just the most central point of the entire continent. So it's a very, 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 very important area, and it's notice it's described as a gleaming white architecture and magnificent statues. It's very symbolic of a lot of Tolkien-esque architecture. So when the White Gold Tower it falls, and Alyssa kind of takes that and then makes that her seat of power, it's symbolic as well as actually kind of I'm building over your empire. And that's why in a lot of the game, you'll notice that there are ruins throughout the countryside that are called the Ayleid ruins. The Ayleids are the race of elves who no longer exist. They've actually kind of been adopted into the other Mer races and have kind of faded from the known realms. So and especially in Valenwood, and so that's where they kind of dispersed, and so that's a big shift, and that's where the like I was saying, that's the giant shift in the First Era, and it's actually one of the I would argue it's the most important event in the First Era. So when we jump into the Second Era, so the First Era lasted about 2,900 years. It's usually attributed to being 2,920 years. The Second Era is significantly shorter. This era only lasted for 897 years. Now, even though it's shorter, because and there's a lot of arguments within the lore, not the lore community, but in-game communities, that the shortening of these eras was because of the shift in power from elves to human. So humans have shorter lifespans, therefore they turn things over very quickly and that nature. So the Second Era begins with the assassination of the last of the Sildur line, and this takes place in what's called 1E2920, and so the last of the Elysian line is assassinated. And this era is also the beginning of the gaining of factions. The factions start appearing. You have your guilds, which are your Mages Guild, your Fighters Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild. All these guilds start kind of growing into these different cities because now they've settled in and they're actually kind of developing their own personalities even more so. There is actually this is also one of the first times that a Daedric prince launches an invasion onto Mundus. And this is from Molag Bal. And this entire event is called the Plane Meld. Now, the Second Era, like I said, is a pretty big time. And I'm trying to make sure I'm going to not say this incorrectly. There are a couple games which actually take place in this era. And most of these, actually, none of the main games take place in the Second Era. Predominantly all the main games take place actually in the Third Era. But there is a figure called the Hero. And this hero is given a title of the Vestige, who then leads an army that actually invades the Daedric Prince's realm, which is called Cold Harbor. and he actually this figure actually puts an end to the plane meld, and if I remember correctly, that's by putting Molag down, like killing him. But just like, you know, in Destiny, death isn't final for Daedric princes. So they stop his invasion, but so what's up?
No, I was going to say, is it very much that the Daedric princes, not princess, but princes, that they exist on Mundus in a withdrawn type of, it's a corporal form, but their true essence, like their vulnerability, is back on Oblivion. So they can die on Mundus and still, you know, have their essence still be intact on Oblivion.
To a degree, I would say, yeah. It's very, very reminiscent of, and you know, a lot of people I know a lot of people will attribute it. Oh, that's like the Ascendant realm of,
or a throne world, maybe. Yeah, I'm one of.
Yeah, the thing to remember is that that's not actually an unknown story mechanism in fantasy. And you know, Tolkien had a degree of it with the differentiations of the realms in his segregation of the world levels. Lewis had it in his, you know, a lot of the more well-known fantasy authors have a degree of that. And this is very, yes, I would say this is very similar to that. Yeah. You can kill a Daedric prince in Mundus, and it's pretty likely that Daedric prince won't actually be dead. It'll just snap him or her or it back into its realm.
Well, it's like a hermit crab.
Right.
You can destroy the shell, but the crab itself just scurries back into the sea.
Yeah, and there's actually even cases like, you know, in the plane meld where you kill them in their realm and they don't die. Like they die, they perish, but they you know, maneuver themselves back into a place of power.
That's weak.
That's what happens when you're basically a god. You can't really get killed. You can just get paused.
No. When I shoot the mans, I like them to stay dead. So I like.
So well, and I was just explaining the plane meld entire process there, and so that was, you know, and I guess I'll kind of defer to you on this one because this is the era that Elder Scrolls takes place in. So when exactly, like what exactly is going on? Is the Elder Scrolls Online more in like Mundus, or is it actually dealing with the Daedric Prince of Baal?
It's weird because most of the gameplay does take place in Tamriel. Like you go to the Somerset Isles, you go to a bunch of the different areas, but the concept is that you are pretty much dead and you were like just kind of like corpse in Molag Bal's area, and they said, okay, we will free you because you're like this, you know, prophesized, you know, superhuman type of thing. You need to,
so you play as the Vestige.
You play as the Vestige. Yes, exactly. So, and then they send you back. And then, so the whole entire game, of course, you also now get involved in a lot of the politics based on what faction that you choose. So you get a lot of the, you know, the men and Myr and the Beast, all their politics that are going on because there's a huge war going on, like starting to brew. Right. But then you have Molag Bal, and then so you are now the main entity, and you're gathering all these other specific forces to go defeat Molag Bal's plan.
Okay, so it is the plane meld that online takes place in. So does like the Three Banners War and all that, is that going on at the same time in the game?
It's brewing. Like you're in the beginning. Yeah, like I haven't gotten to end game content because Destiny Taken King kind of came out. So that
is a legit excuse.
We'll accept it.
Okay, good. I got really close. I got very close to the end stuff. But from my understanding, that once the end game content is more of the actual war, because you play a lot of, again, depending upon what faction you choose, right. you follow their story on like, well, we're right because of this, and that, and you have to do a bunch of their bidding and stuff. So it pretty much ends right before the war, that I recall.
Assuming the factions are the the Ebonheart, the Daggerfall, and the Aldmeri?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, freaking Aldmeri. I hate the Aldmeri. Sorry. Just on principle, I cannot stand the Aldmeri because of what happens later with them. So the Three Banners War was a giant power struggle between three factions, which we just kind of talked about. It's the Ebonheart Pact, the Daggerfall Covenant, Covenant, and then the first Aldmeri Dominion. I'm not really familiar on the first two, but the last one, Aldmeri Dominion, it's the first dominion of the Aldmeri Empire, or the Aldmeri, I guess it's Empire. And it's basically elves that are like, we're better than you, and we don't care about you because you're mortal. And so I'm not a fan of. I never played.
That's funny because when I played online, I was part of the Aldmeri Dominion because they had the best like class setups for based on race. I'm like, oh, I want to play that. So I played through it, and like their story from their perspective is completely different. So they were just kind of they're just kind of like, oh, we want to reunite everyone. We want to unite everyone, and like
I'm sure they do. They're liars.
But to be fair, based on what their story was. There was a lot of other like BS that was going on at the same time. Like the leader, the chick, I forget her name. She was like genuinely like invested in these people and wanted to do right by them. But then her brother was the one that wanted the power and just wanted to crap everything. And so he kept like throwing all this shit at her. And then finally she's like, you know what? I can't handle this. I'm gonna go to my special place. So and that's kind of where I left off on that. But yeah.
So Blue, I just want to touch on your elf resentment.
It's not.
Sorry.
No, okay.
I'm sorry.
Correction.
No.
Let me clarify. It's not elf. It's not elf.
Elves.
It's Aldmeri.
The Andamir. No. Yeah, they're kind of dicks.
No, I've there's an undercurrent that's been flowing through this whole thing. Is Blue does not like elves.
Not elves. I don't mind. I play Bosmers. I play wood elves. Like I've always played a wood elf. Like, but oh my gosh,
Now I can't really speak a whole lot to the different elven factions here in the game because I haven't played the thing and I'm not very knowledgeable about it. But I have been a giant Tolkien nut for a very long time,
right?
And I can definitely
Altmers are.
I can kind of sympathize with the elves just in the simple fact that you've got a group of people who are long haul, like their expectancy in this realm is a lot longer, and then the humans are kind of like the renters that come in and just trash the place, and then they're going to be gone in a little bit. So I can definitely see the superiority and the resentment and everything that comes to, and it's a theme that I think every fantasy that involves elves and immortality and humans.
It's a classic juxtaposition between immortality and mortal races.
Yeah. Well,
an immortal race is going to be more quote unquote patient and
immortal goals and immortal interests.
They're more long game, and whereas obviously the human who only lives 90 years compared to the 1,000 years of the elves is going to be a flash in the pan. But the Altmer take that to an extreme. They're just assholes. Like,
yeah, they are.
I mean, I'm sorry, but they are just complete and utter a-holes. And
they sound like my people.
See, I'm more of a Bosmer player. It's the Wood Elves, and that's mostly because they are just mechanics wise, they're more ranged and they're more sneak oriented. But also in the story, they just don't care. They don't make themselves a part of any of it. Like they're quick-witted, like they're very, very snarky about things, but they don't get involved. Like they just are like, oh, that's nice. I'm just gonna go back to my forest in Valenwood and ignore all of you because you're all stupid, and I'm gonna live longer than you anyways. So,
yep.
So
that sums up them pretty well. And their green pact.
I just love Bosnia.
I just see them just like na 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 boo boo, and you're all gonna die. I'm gonna be okay.
The Bosmer?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do that, but you won't see them
Yeah.
because they're just amazingly.
Well, is it wrong? The Tolkien themes just keep streaming through my head. That's all I see.
Right.
That's
And
all I see. I see the
very
elves on the
Tolkien-esque.
ship. I see the elves on the ship departing for the,
That is very that's kind of very Altmer, except Altmer. So Altmer it's not so noticeable in the second, and well, it's kind of more noticeable in the third era, but let's jump into the third era. So the thing to keep in mind is these Altmer, which are the main components of this faction called the Aldmeri Dominion. They are very. It's not that they're anti-men. They're not like anti-human. They just think that we're really stupid and that we don't know what we're doing. And they think that they are
right.
Well, to a degree, I could see this. However, the way that they go about correcting this as they see it is very, very, I think, incorrect. And so the third era, which is even shorter than the last in the second era. The third era only lasts 433 years. This is described as many as the most glorious era. This was the time of the Septim dynasty, which is a human family line, Tiber Septim, and earlier Uriel Septim the seventh, which are predominant in the majority of the main titles. So of the 5 main title games, 4 of them take place in the third era, and those are the first one, which is Arena, second one, which is Daggerfall, third is Morrowind, and then fourth is Oblivion. All of them and all of their DLCs take place in the third era. So even though this era is half the length of the previous era, which is like half the length of the other eras, there is a ton of stuff that happens in this era. You have numerous wars. You have, political espionage that makes everything before it look peaceful. And then the ending of this era is the Oblivion Crisis, which is very, the game Oblivion. That is the entire ending of this era. And it is not just as the same as the second era began with the assassination of the last of a powerful line. The third era ends with the sacrifice of a character named Martin Septim, which is the last of the Septims. And the cool thing about this is the Septims were known to be Dragonborn, which is a term that many of us who have played Skyrim would probably be familiar with. So Uriel is actually a Dragonborn, or Tiber Septim, who was the first Septim, was actually a Dragonborn. Martin Septim is actually a he transforms into a dragon. I think if I remember right, he's actually channeling Akatosh as a way to end the Oblivion Crisis. And so this is it's a huge battle, and it's actually really cool. If you haven't played Oblivion, you should go just watch this ending scene because it's really kind of cool. But this is the introduction of let me just back up from the very beginning. Arena.
The beginning?
No, not the beginning. The beginning of the main
Not the beginning.
Not the beginning. The beginning of the main.
You've been going for a bit.
No, the beginning of the main
beginning.
Series. So
okay.
So like I said, 4 of the games take place in the third era. The first of the games is called Arena, and this takes place in the years 389 to 399. And it's a pretty simple game, just because at that time it was pretty revolutionary, but by today's standards, it's extremely simple. And you basically play the figure of a character called the Eternal Champion. The Eternal Champion is a figure whose entire purpose is to rescue Uriel Septim, who is the Emperor, from the traitorous, what his name is, Jagar Tharn, who is the head wizard. And he basically threw Uriel into Oblivion and then shapeshifted himself into the Emperor and took over the Empire. So your entire point of your character is to reassemble what's called the Staff of Chaos and kill Tharn. And so you do that. And so this is like 300 years into this era. That leads into Daggerfall, which takes place in 405. Now in Daggerfall, you play again as this prophesized hero who's called the Hero of Daggerfall. And in this game, again, Uriel Septim, the seventh, is the Emperor, and he has sent you on a quest. And basically, the quest is the collection of pieces of power that lead into the ability or the item, which is Numidium. And Numidium is an important item that was used by Tiber Septim at the end of the Second Era to unify the entire landmass of Tamriel. And it's a Dwemer artifact. So again, Dwemer are not only super annoyingly mysterious, they're also super powerful. And they make really, really big robots. And it's annoying to fight them.
Yes.
They're
Whoa. Did you say robots?
Yeah. They're like clockwork. It's like a weird like.
Were they powered by steam?
Were they
oil?
Some of them were, but they were mostly powered by like soul gems.
Yeah,
or like a weird variant of soul gems.
Yeah, and had like oil and gears and stuff. They're really weird. And they come out of these holes in the wall that look like the little sister holes. So
I swear to God, this game sounds more and more like Skylanders by the moment. They came out and they were all with clockwork and mechanics.
Anyway. So the entire point of Daggerfall is to create the Numidium, and the game ends. The funny thing about Daggerfall is like the game has 5 various endings. So it actually has 5 different endings, and in order to create Morrowind, they had to find a way to create a continuity in the storyline. So they created this thing called the Warp of the West, and the way they explain the continuity is they just basically are like, yeah, all 5 events happened at the same time because
parallel universes.
Because the warp. They explained it. They said that due to the fact that in order to retrieve the Mantella, which is an aspect of the Numidium, you have to go into Aetherius. So actually, yeah, we do go into Aetherius at this point. There is a disruption that caused the space-time. And Akatosh, who is the dragon god of time, just basically was like, yeah, all this happened. So your hero is killed. The kingdoms of numerous kingdoms are victorious in their individual civil wars. The Imperial forces are defeated by the orcs, who then create Orsinium. And then all Tamriel is reunited. And, the King of Worms becomes a god and comes back. So there's all that fun stuff, which in the game, you can only pick one. So it's kind of a Mass Effect-y type response, which leads into Morrowind, which takes place in 427. In Morrowind, I'm still not really sure, but because it seems like there's a ton of stuff that happens in Morrowind, and it only looks like it's only 1 year. This guy walked a lot because there was no fast travel in Morrowind. But you play as... Well, no, I take that back. There were the Stiltwalkers. Stiltwalkers existed, I think, in Morrowind. But... So you play...
That's your version of fast travel?
The Stiltwalkers was a attempt at fast travel, but you couldn't, you can't, in Oblivion and Skyrim, you can fast travel from any point to any point. You can say, I'm in the middle of nowhere, I want to fast travel to a city. In Morrowind, you had to be at a specific point, and you could only travel to other specific points. So if you're 50 miles away from that specific point, you had to walk the 50 miles. It was fun. I promise, it was a lot of fun. But anyways, you play as the Nerevarine, which is...
I don't believe you.
It's a little bit. It's a piece.
The scary
Walk
thing
for a
is,
pace.
so the scary thing is that each of these games is actually geographically smaller than the one before. Arena is actually, I think, if I remember correctly, the Arena is actually the largest game of the Morrowind or the in Elder Scrolls series. I'm going to get the name right eventually. Arena was actually geographically the biggest of them. And so each of these games gets progressively smaller geographically to the point where it's Skyrim, which you can still spend a day walking across the province of Skyrim, but it's ridiculous.
You're really not selling this thing.
No.
Like
You need to play
are.
it, and you will play it. So you'll shut your.
You can literally spend a day.
Well, the other
amazing.
the other fun thing about Morrowind is that was how you could build up your physical attributes was by walking. So I remember playing where you would duct tape your controller and just walk into a wall to keep maxing up your strength. This is the beauty. This is the beauty of not having cheat codes, and you actually had to like figure out ways around the hardware limitations of the games that you were playing.
Oh my god!
This also is where my fascination of finding the walls and breaking out of the invisible barriers of games came from, because Morrowind was an evil game that had a lot of random invisible walls that were not.
So
visible walls are the worst.
You get XP for walking?
Yeah, because it's an RPG, so you're building up. Oblivion had the same.
That was not a
concept.
sufficient. No, that was not a sufficient explanation. So
how else would you build up your strength?
By lifting weights or something.
Walking.
I mean, walking.
Well, yeah, you're carrying a giant pack of stuff.
You have all your equipment.
I mean, like, who else is going to carry that wooden spoon that you accidentally picked up from that dungeon that you were just in? And like,
Those wooden
have to
spoons
carry.
sold for a lot of gold. You leave my wooden spoon collection.
Why?
Well, enchanted daggers, man. That's
no. You're talking to a kleptomaniac in these games. I would steal just about everything that was not bolted. Actually, I have an equation that determined whether or not I was going to steal it. So,
yeah, I believe him. I think there was a spreadsheet.
It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was basically you divide the value that you would get by the weight, and if it was above 1, you would steal.
So. No, you go ahead, Blue. You finish that thought. No, go ahead.
Like that can be put into an app, like RPG stealing. Is it worth it? You know, put the thing in there minus the weight, and then push a button, and then it will tell you like, this has a 90% value of worth stealing.
No,
you know?
No, it's at its heart, it is opportunity cost.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Economics.
I'm not joking. I always played a thief or an assassin in these games.
Okay. Blue, I'm going to let you finish. Go ahead. Just finish. And then I'm going to have my say. I'm going to do... See, this is why this show is so great, because I clearly delineate the segues. No, Blue. No, seriously. Are you done with the third era?
No.
Third era has a lot of stuff.
The third era has a ton of stuff. So okay, so Morrowind
it has the bulk of the games in it. So
Morrowind ends with Dagoth being killed. Like you kill Dagoth Earth, and you basically unite all three of there's the Dunmer, which are the Dark Elves, and they live in Morrowind, and they have what's basically called houses, and these are the political structures of Morrowind. And as part of your storyline, you unite the three of the great houses, and you oppose the invasion that is caused that Dagoth who is another Daedric prince, is trying to create, and you kill him. And then this is where they also introduced the concept of DLC, because at this point Morrowind was actually ported over to the consoles. It was a terrible port, but because they took a game that was designed for a place or a PC and they put it onto a console, and anybody who's typed on a keyboard will understand that there are not that many keys on a console controller, but they didn't change any of the command structures. It was annoying. However, they came out with DLCs, and these DLCs actually led eventually, they expanded on the story of the Nerevarine, and they also gave you the explanation of the death of Hercene, and then also the killing of a minor god. Doesn't even really matter. Almaxia. And these were two other events that the Nerevarine basically saved Nirn from crazy Daedric princes going insane. But all this leads into Oblivion. And Oblivion is the fourth game, but it also is the game that marks the end of the Third Era. And as is usual with most of the Elder Scrolls games, you start off as a prisoner. Like all the Elder Scrolls games, you always start off as either a prisoner or someone who's on a shipwreck. It's a pretty classical RPG element because it gives you an excuse not to have anything and you have to collect everything. So you start off as a prisoner, and then you have Uriel Septim, the seventh, has a dream which basically tells him that there is a hero within his prison that will close shut the jaws of Oblivion, which is the Oblivion Crisis. After this dream, his family starts getting assassinated. And so he is actually in the process of escaping the Imperial City when you are out to be executed and your paths kind of cross, and it just, standard RPG. Hey, hero, why don't you join our party? Blah, blah, blah. And you basically step in and you actually you try to save him, and he actually gets assassinated and he dies, and they basically pass the task of finding his last surviving heir onto your character, which then leads into, once you find Martin, who is the last surviving heir of the Septim Throne, this leads to the battle of Oblivion and the closing of the gates, which has been orchestrated by the Prince of Destruction, Mehrunes Dagon, which we kind of talked about already. So that is the end of the Third Era. Now, there are events that are in the DLCs, such as the Sheogorath story arc, and then the Knights of the Nine, which deal with oh man, what's the guy's name? The entity is Uamiril, but I know, Mel, you had talked about him just a second.
Oh, Molag Bal?
No, not like Pelinal White Streak.
Oh, okay. I'm
his
like, what are we?
Yeah, sorry, no. His importance is he killed a character called Umaril the Unfeathered, and in the DLC of the Knights of the Nine, which takes place right after the Oblivion Crisis, Umaril actually is resurrected, and your character, the hero of the Kvatch, is tasked to put him down. And you go on to become what's called the Second Divine Crusader, which basically it's a quest of collecting all these different aspects of the nine divines, which is the pantheon of Cyrodiil, or the imperial pantheon. So you collect all these pieces and you become basically a holy Templar, a holy warrior, and you actually overthrow Umaril in the mortal realm and then actually chase him into his own version of the Oblivion plane, which is the spiritual realm. And this whole thing is called the Aurorian Crisis, and you end that as well. And then you get the Shivering Isles, which basically is, hey, we have this crazy guy, a crazy Daedric prince called Sheogorath. You've run into him a couple of times, but let's go visit him on his home turf. And that is the entire, when we were talking about the Grey March, that was this entire story arc. So this all happens, and that's the end of the Third Era. Needless to say, there's a lot that happens in the Third Era. And
that was a bunch.
Yeah, I'm sure I have forgotten a ton. Like you could spend hours talking about just the events in Oblivion, the Oblivion Crisis. But
so Oblivion populates the Third Era exclusively?
Yeah, it's blurry on the DLC, whether or not the It's blurry on the DLC whether or not that's it's at the end of the third era and the cusp of the beginning of the fourth era. And so, like, especially Shivering Isles, I'm not really sure where Shivering Isles falls. I think technically it falls in the third era, but you could probably make an argument that it's actually kind of the start of the fourth era, because the actual third era ends with the sacrifice of Martin to end the Oblivion Crisis. So,
what do you think, Mel?
I actually have not played Oblivion, so this is all lots of new information to me. Like, I knew bits and pieces about what happened in Oblivion just to kind of like prepare myself when I was going to Skyrim, because they do refer someone to this stuff. I'm like, what are they talking about? So I did a little bit of reading, but not to the extent of what we just covered. So, but yeah, I'm ready to go into fourth era because
yeah, this is a fun one.
Yeah, because I know a lot of what happens in the fourth era because I played Skyrim.
Fourth era is where it's at, and that's why I'm gonna read fourth era, my personal favorite era within this game. It's
how is it your personal favorite?
Well, honestly, it's my personal favorite because it's colored orange in the show notes. So it begins with the general decline of the mages, which I think we could all probably foreseen due to the rumor that magic started the Oblivion Crisis. So magic is not in vogue at the moment. And this kind of led to the White Gold Concordat. The Great War from 4E 171 to 4E 175 seems like Dewey Decimal numbers, but we'll roll with it. Was the name given to the armed conflict between the Third Aldmeri Dominion and the Mede Empire during the Fourth Era. The Thalmor call it, quite forebodingly, the First War with the Empire. So, kind of here I'm thinking they're referring to the White Gold Concordat as the Empire.
Well, no. The Concordat was the treaty that ended the Great War. And the reason why it's called the White Gold is because, again, remember the White Gold Tower at the center of the Imperial City? That was the Mede Empire. That was actually... The Mede Empire is the human forces. The Aldmeri Dominion was the elven forces. And the third Aldmeri Dominion is actually the basis of my hatred of the Aldmeri Dominion, because they're mostly comprised of a sect called the Thalmor. And they are the snobbish of the snobbish. Like, they don't deal well.
Their armor is gold. That should tell you right off the bat that they're kind of jerks. So
what?
Yeah, no, the Thalmor
that sounds real good. I know. I mean, say I'm gonna get gold armor. That makes me a jerk.
Well, everyone else is wearing like fur and sticks, so yeah.
Yeah,
it's not my part. It's not my fault you made poor life choices and you're wearing sticks. It's not my job to keep you in gold armor.
No, so basically what happened was they came to Titus II and they said, here's our terms. We're going, well, here, let me just read this quote real quick. This is actually a quote from the game. And it says, the terms were harsh. Well, this is for the Gold Concordat. So this was at the end of the Great War. And he says, the terms are harsh, but Titus II believed that it was necessary to secure peace and give the empire a chance to regain its strength. The two most controversial terms of the Concordat were the banning of the worship of Talos and the cessation of a large section of southern Hammerfall, most of which was already occupied by Aldmeri forces. Critics have pointed out that the Concordat is almost identical to the ultimatum the Emperor rejected 5 years earlier. However, there is a great difference between agreeing to such terms under the mere threat of war and agreeing to them at the end of a long and destructive war. No part of the Empire would have accepted these terms in 4 East 171, dictated by the Thalmor at Sword's Point. Titus II would have faced civil war. by 4E175, most of the Empire welcomed peace at almost any price. And that was from a legionnaire who was stationed in Skyrim, he was stationed in Hammerfell. Anyways, the point of it was that ultimatum that they demanded was the start of this entire conflict. They basically sent a Thalmor diplomat, and he came into the Imperial City and he said, "Hey, this is the deal. We're going to ally with you, but in order for us not to go to war, you need to stop having Talos in your pantheon," which Talos is the god form of Tiber Septim, who was a human. So he's like a Hercules figure. Mm-hmm. And then you also need to give us this segment of Hammerfell. And the Emperor was just like, huh, that's nice. No, go away. The response of the diplomat was basically to go over to a cart and open up the cart and dump out the heads of every single one of the diplomats that the Empire had within the regions of the Elsewhere and the Aldmeri dominions. So they had found and then rooted out all, and these individual agents were what was formed of the Blades. There was a formation of the Blades, which was another part of the ultimatum, was the dismissal of the Blades. And they had found every single Blade and beheaded them, collected their heads, put them in a cart, and taken them all the way to the Imperial City, basically to the point that it was either you accept our ultimatum or we're going to war. And that was what started the Great War. Now, the Great War would rage for 5 years within the Empire. The Empire finally, the Citadel finally gives in and this is the White Gold Concordat. And this treaty was signed in 175, so 4 years basically. However, what happened was because of the conditions of the White Gold Concordat, that actually created a very, very big schism within Citadel's political structure. So what that results in is Skyrim, who holds Talos as their patron, was basically F you, we're not giving up our god. And then Hammerfell, which is the southern part of it, was screw you, we're not giving up our country. And so these two provinces split from the central province of Citadel, which some argued in the game was actually the entire point. They wanted to segregate these human provinces from one another. And so Skyrim, which I'm sure Mel is going to jump into on that, because that was the civil war in Skyrim. And then what happens in Hammerfell actually is like, you know what, you can sign your concordat. We refuse. We're not giving up our countrymen to this invading force. And they go on to fight for another 5 years before they actually manage to fight the Aldmeri Dominion to a standstill and actually back off. And so Hammerfell becomes an independent state. Now it's like completely decimated, but it's now an independent state, and they are actually looking at Citadel with the message of, we told you so. We could have done this. You just backed out. You backed down before we could prove to you that we actually could do this. And this was a big part of the chat, actually, was, what would have happened if Hammerfell and Skyrim actually convinced Citadel to stay in the war? Because then you would have had, so Red Guards, who are from Hammerfell, and the Nords, who are from Skyrim, are the most battle-hardened figures of the playable races in the game. Like, the Nords are basically the Norse berserkers, and the Red Guards are like I don't even know what they would. I mean, they're just solid fighting machines. But if they actually fought together, they would just run away. But with that being said, I'll let Mel kind of talk about the Civil War in Skyrim.
Well, within Skyrim, you're kind of interjected. I'm just going to kind of start from like the beginning of the game. You're pretty much there, and you right off the bat you're telling, oh, well, you're the Dragonborn, which means you're born of dragons, and that you're the only one that can defeat them. And as you're going through Skyrim, because this is where this takes place, you start being thrown into the Civil War, and the Civil War is result of the Concordat in the sense that there's people who still worship Talos, and then there's the people of the Imperial Legions. And so you go through the whole entire areas of Skyrim and you meet different people who are like for it and against it. And some people are still worshiping Talos, and there's people who are like, well, no, we need to kill you because you're worshiping Talos, and that's not part of the thing. And so you also get kind of involved, if I remember right, because it's been a couple of years since I've played this game, that that you are getting involved, and there is one specific leader of the Nords, and he's troubled because he doesn't know which way to fall, and you have to kind of help him decide which way to go. And that was kind of like the final. God, what is the word I'm looking for? The final decision of what you need to make within the game. Mm-hmm. So,
whether or not to side with the Stormcloaks or the Imperial Legion.
Right. And you go through, and you can do different missions for each sect. So, like, I remember I got to the point where I was just kind of doing them for both to kind of see which one I wanted to side with, because I didn't know all this back history at the time. So, and then eventually you have to help the king to decide. Either you overthrow him and you side with one side. I think if you overthrow him, you side with the Imperial Legion, and if you side with the Stormcloaks, you keep him in and you help him fight. Is that right?
Yeah. Are you talking about Ulrich?
Yeah. I couldn't remember his name. Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't remembering something incorrectly.
No. And the other important thing in Skyrim is you play the last Dragonborn, who is known as the Dovahkiin. And
so let's just explain it to me so I'm sure that you understand it. What is being Dragonborn?
Do you want to take that, Mel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess. So Dragonborn, from my knowledge, just within Skyrim, I haven't read much lore outside of it, so I'm going to preface with that, is that you are one that can kill dragons, but you can also absorb their souls and therefore take on the abilities of certain dragons. Is there more to it than that, Blue?
Yeah, so
I figure there is.
Yeah, there's a little bit.
Why don't you elaborate on that? Okay.
So a Dragonborn is basically a mortal who has been blessed by Akatosh, who is the father of dragons and basically the chief of the 9 divines, or the 8 divines in the one. He is.
Whoa, what?
So Akatosh is the father of
9?
dragons. The 9 divines. They're not, well, there are 8 divines and then Talos. So it's 9 divines, but it's 8 Aedra and Talos. Because remember, Talos was a human who became a god.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they're called the 8 and 1. It's just a nuance that it's taken up in Cyrodiil. But a Dragonborn it's a blessing that they have an aptitude for the use of what's called the Thu'um. And that is there's a couple different aspects of the Thu'um. There is the ability to absorb knowledges of these shouts, because so Elder Scrolls is a world steeped in magic, right?
Right.
And there's different variations of magic. There's conjuration, there's alchemy, there's, necromancy and stuff like this, restoration, correct. And each of these things have different rituals in which you use to summon the abilities to cause either harm or healing or whatever it is that you're using. Dragons actually, as creatures of extreme magical potence, they actually don't need to do arbitrary rituals. They just speak, and their speech manifests in a display of power of magic, magical energy. A Dragonborn is basically a dragon that has been inserted into a mortal form, because dragons are generally viewed as immortal. And so, but there's a trick to it, because they're mortal, they don't know the way to commune with the magical energies like a natural born dragon would. So they have to learn that. And in order to learn that, they have to absorb that knowledge directly from the souls of dragons that they slay. So this causes a bit of problem because that requires them to kill dragons to gain power, which of course means that dragons hate and fear Dovahkiins. Because the removal of their soul kind of stems the ability to be immortal. They die, and they don't like that.
It hurts him.
And so the character that you play in Skyrim is often called the last Dragonborn, which is opposed to the first Dragonborn, who was a dragon. It's a priest whose name was Marak, and he was actually put down when he tried to revolt against his masters in the Mytheric Age. So he was actually way, way, way at the beginning of this timeline. Marak existed. And the importance of Marak is actually he comes back in one of the DLCs for Skyrim. It's I think the latest DLC actually. And so you actually have to do battle with him. But so that's basically the Dragonborn. There's a lot of the Septums were believed to be. Tiber Septim was a Dragonborn, and that's where you get the Amulet of Kings, which was a very prominent artifact inside of Oblivion and some of the other games. So, that would be the prominent information about the Dragonborn. I mean, the Skyrim, the people of Skyrim hold them very, very highly, and there's an entire religious order called the Greybeards that kind of exist to. They value what's called the Way of the Voice, which is basically a passing on of the knowledge of the Thu'um. But they're not necessarily. I don't remember if any. I don't think the Greybeards are actually Dragonborn. They're just.
I don't remember them being either.
I think they know the knowledge, and they can do like weak versions of the Thu'um. So, but the important thing of the main character in Skyrim is that as the last Dragonborn, you have been prophesized to defeat Alduin, who is, this giant figure. And he's also called the World Eater. Now, he is, whereas most of these more powerful immortal figures are kind of, amoral, which we've kind of talked about. Alduin is pretty malevolent. Like he wants to just eat the world. He wants to nom the planet. And
because some men just want to see the world burn.
Yeah, he views it
that
as
type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. He's kind of his name. I know. I'm trying to figure out. I remember his name was. His name is actually separated into Alduin, which in Dragonese, I guess, means destroyer, devour, master. So he proclaims that he's the firstborn of Akatosh, and he actually claims that he is a manifestation and aspect of Akatosh. So he thinks that he is the second coming of Akatosh, basically. So yeah, Alduin is not a good person, and that's actually the ending. The ending of Skyrim is you doing battle with Alduin after he takes on Sovngarde, which is basically the equivalent of Valhalla in this world. So
think of Alduin as Smog, but instead of gold, he wants everything, like the world.
Right.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a I want to say it's Yggdrasil from Norse mythology.
Now you're losing me. I don't know Norse mythology.
Yeah, no, that's actually what I was going to say, Blue. Yggdrasil.
Yeah, is it Yggdrasil, I think?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm looking it up right now.
No, so I'm really intrigued by this one little thing Blue said, and he kind of glossed over it really quickly, and I kind of feel like it might have been on purpose.
No, what is it?
It's so the dragons.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the 8+1.
Okay, so the 8+1 is there are 8. Hang on, let me pull them up.
Because I've kind of got this dragon theory.
Yeah, no, I know you do. Give me 1 second. So the 8+1, while I'm looking this up, the 8+1 is a imperial pantheon inside of... Come on. There we go. The 8+1 are 8 Aedra, and then the raised human war god hero Talos. So imagine Talos as a Elder Scrolls variation of Hercules, right? You know, Hercules was a demigod who through his trials he was able to become a god. That's Talos. Tiber Septim, he was responsible for the unification of Citadel, and a lot of the height of the Third Era is from the Septim dynasty, and the Septims come from... He is the first Septim. The 8 Aedra, there's 8 of them, and they are Akatosh, which is the dragon god of time, Arche, who is the god of life and death, Dibella, the goddess of beauty, Julianos, who is the god of wisdom and logic, Kinnereth, who is the goddess of air, Mara, the goddess of love,
Mara?
Yeah, Stindar, the god of mercy, and Zenithar, the god of work and commerce, who is the god of trade. So these form the majority of the what's called the imperial pantheon. Now, the White Gold Concordat wants them to return to the 8 divines. And this was because, again, remember the Aldmeri Dominion, the third Aldmeri Dominion, really didn't like mortals. Well, they don't want a human being revered as a god, because that kind of goes against everything they stand for. So that's the entire basis of their saying, you do not worship Talos anymore, which of course translates into a lot of Skyrim getting a little bit annoyed and saying, no, we're going to continue worshiping him. And so but so that's when we say the 8+1, that's the 8 Aedra and then the human god Talos. And so that's the 9 divines.
So I don't know if you're familiar, but I've got this dragon theory, and it's from Destiny. So basically, I find it very freaking weird that dragons in this game are tied to the number 9, because in Chinese mythology, dragons are intrinsically linked to the number 9. Chinese dragons are always mentioned in terms of 9 attributes, each of which consists of a mathematical problem that is a multiple of 9. And I can't remember all the numbers right now. It's like 113 scales, which is 9 times something, and so on and so forth. So the number 9 in Chinese mythology is synonymous with the dragon, and also it is good luck. And the Chinese emperor will always have 9 dragons on his robes, and he'll actually hide one of them. He'll only ever show 8. Kind of the 8+1.
Right. And so before you go too far down the rabbit hole.
No.
The 9,
we're already down there.
Right. Well,
I'm home.
Yeah, I'm home. The 9 divine are the main gods. So just like any pantheon, these gods have minor gods on top of that.
That doesn't change my...
No. It doesn't, because a lot of the 9 are the predominant deities within the empire. Now,
why does the number 9 keep coming up? That's my biggest question.
Justin has an X file on the number 9.
How does it keep coming up? Once was me, twice was weird, 3 times across 2 games, seemingly across multiple platforms, is just crazy.
The truth is out there.
Just got to hunt it.
So, I mean,
sorry.
I
Sorry,
think,
talks. Yes.
I think we
Go.
actually managed to hit on everything that the chat covered. The chat was pretty slow, I think mostly because of just, we kind of talked about it at the beginning. We're used to having to get inventive to make connections. So the fact that this is all very well and documented and orchestrated out was kind of, I think, daunting for a lot of people.
Yeah. This reads a much more like a history lesson than like theorizing about religion or something, where I feel like with Destiny lore, we're kind of just, oh, what about this and this, and this crazy crap. And whereas this is kind of like, in the 6th century, God created man,
I'm much more at home when I can say whatever I want at any given time and not be wrong. This is bullshit. No, I'm.
You can take your knife and your dragons, and you can drop your mic. No.
No. Who writes a complete story? Who does that?
Well, and again, it's like we don't know how they're going to write Skyrim. I mean, that was like the whole thing with Daggerfall was really confusing because Daggerfall, like I was saying, Daggerfall had 5 different endings, and you only could pick one. So at the end of Daggerfall, when they came out with Morrowind, it was like, which one is going to be canon? And that's when they introduced that Warp of the West and kind of, weaseled their way around. They Mass Effected it. And they said, oh, all of them are. And so it's interesting to me because, it's written, it only seems like it's written in extreme detail because we're looking at it from the ending of the 5th game. I mean, this thing has been spanning numerous years and, numerous titles. I think, like I said, we're sitting at like 17 or 20. I mean, including DLCs alone, you got 1, 2, 3. You have seven DLCs just in the main title, and then if you include DLCs and just all the spin-offs, that's another 12. You're talking about 24 different games at that point, and so 24 different games, all of which have their own substantial amount of lore built into them, as well as built out of them as other sources start coming out. You're going to have a Tolkien-esque storyline.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you can't just with Mass Effect, I know we're talking about Mass Effect real quick, we have ended a bunch of different storylines. We don't know which one's right. So we're just going to go to a completely different galaxy now and just forget all about that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You have a set area, I always feel it's a little bit harder to keep attentive on fantasy realms that are based in this type of fantasy instead of like fantasy, like space fantasy, because you always have a very set world. Like you can't all of a sudden like, oh, well, we just going to this other place that didn't exist before, but it exists now. So,
well, and that's the crazy thing with Elder Scrolls is like, exactly. Like there's a lot of fantasy games that are like, oh yeah, we conveniently have a spirit world. Whereas Elder Scrolls, it's like, oh no, we've had that. We mentioned that in the first game, actually.
Yeah.
We've talked about this from day one. And now you have access to it. And all that stuff that we already explained, here's what it actually looks like.
But that's the power of classical fantasy, though.
Right.
That was the power of Tolkien. He did so much legwork. He laid out so much architecture beforehand.
Right. No.
He actually gave you the impression that there's a fucking language already.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how can this not be real? There's already a language. There's manuscripts. Like, that's the kind of infrastructure I see that Elder Scrolls has built into it. And I really dig that.
Bethesda
I really dig
general,
that
because they do that with pretty much all their titles. I mean, Fallout has very similar.
Oh, Jesus!
You want to talk about random? God, the day that we choose to do Fallout, I'm just gonna probably curl up in a ball because, like, I know a fair share of Fallout, but I know the humorous aspects, which is basically them breaking the fourth wall and making fun of other games. Like, I'm not familiar with the actual, like, I know the storyline of Fallout 3 and some of the Fallout 2, but, like, yeah, no, Fallout is pretty similar to this. I mean, it's not as extensive as this because Elder Scrolls has gone significantly longer than Fallout, but Fallout is getting to a point where it's getting pretty robust lore-wise as well.
Oh, I love the lore of Fallout. It's so great. That's one I've actually gone through and read a lot of the lore from like the beginning of what happened, like, and then the events leading up to what happened in Fallout that, takes place in the games and stuff, and all the different, how certain races were created. And so again, that's another one. If you guys want to talk about that, I can do that.
So we got Mel on for Borderlands and Fallout.
Fallout. Yeah. And if you ever do like
The Awoken.
Oh,
my babies! Oh, my babies!
How's that Mara Sov coming?
Wait, which Mars? Oh, jeez. Oh god. Let's not talk about Destiny costumes right now because I got a lot on my plate already, and I just sit there. I'm like, oh my. So, yeah, do we want to wrap up this wonderful?
Yeah, let's move into. You got any shout outs for us? Or let's let Justin go first. I think he's got
just because he's gonna die because he hasn't got to say anything for like the last 2 hours.
Wait, you were talking?
I said some stuff. It was mostly about Lord of the Rings, but
close enough. It has elves and orcs and humans in it, and dragons, and
and again, we're predominantly Destiny, so this is a nod. Justin, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say I was gonna talk about the Fourth Age, and then Blue took it from us. But no, I was gonna lay a challenge out there to Mel. Yeah,
about
if you will do a Marasov cosplay, I will do a full on My Awoken Hunter cosplay.
You'll do it?
I'll do it.
But now here's a challenge. You're in Texas. I'm in Nevada. We will have to find a location in which both of them will exist at the same time and place, and not create a third dimensional warp drive game mechanic. Like
temporal vortex is, I think, the term. That's the time travel term you're looking at.
One of us will have to become ascendant, so that way we can travel to the other one, right?
No. I will do my full on Awoken Hunter with the face paint and everything.
Everything?
If you'll do Marasov. Yeah, everything.
Oh. Okay.
I'll make it happen. I won't wear raid gear because I'm not gonna cattle bones and make armor. But
you have cattle bones.
That's what I've got. That's what I have access to. Anyways, moving on.
That was your Destiny bone for the night. You're welcome, guys. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes, that was the Destiny bone for tonight. Okay. So, I have a few shout-outs. Yeah. I got some shout-outs. I'm not going to have Blue read those for me as well. I'm going to read these for myself. I'd like to big shout-out to Uni for being a great guest host on our Weapons of Sorrow episode. And Mel, of course, for being a great guest host this week and carrying me through Elder Scrolls. That's awesome. Big shout out to Guardian Radio, who had our boy Blue on for some Destiny talk. It was awesome. Just listening to it was awesome. And also Bungie, big shout out. Keep the Twitch streams coming. I love them. And I'm going to pass it off to Mel.
Oh, geez. Shout outs. Well, thank you guys. I guess big shout out to Focus Fire Chat in general for having me back on to talk about lore. And hopefully we'll talk about some other subjects that I'm a little bit more versed in. But yeah, so a big shout out to you guys. Other shout outs just everyone in general for kind of just supporting me through the costuming stuff and people who follow me online through multiple venues. Thank you guys. And I hope you guys are enjoying these guys at Focus Fire Chat. Please check them out and listen to their other podcasts because they're actually pretty awesome. And if you love Destiny, definitely check the rest of them out.
Hey, Mel, where can we find you? Where can our
yeah, you could. Sorry, it's getting late. You guys can find me. Wind of the Stars is the handle that I use pretty much anywhere. So you guys can find me through Wind of the Stars on Facebook. It's just Wind of the Stars cosplay. Wind of the Stars on Twitter, Instagram, and everything along those lines. Pretty much, if you Google Wind of the Stars, you will be able to find me. So, and those of you who are interested, I'm a PS4 girl. I'm not a Xbox One. I'm sorry. Focus Fire Chat is Xbox One.
Nobody's perfect.
Sorry. So.
No, but, actually, I did just check out your website for the first time. Freaking amazing. So
thank you.
Definitely check that out. www.windofthestars.com. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
A+ for Justin.
Boom, boom. Yeah, and be sure and tweet Mel on the Marsov challenge.
Oh, geez.
If you would like to see me dressed like an awoken male hunter.
Well, I'm already ahead of you on this because I already have the face paint and the wig from Marsov because I was going to make it like a year ago when Vanilla came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you may underestimate how long I've been planning, like, doing my hunter cosplay.
Well, you do realize I have a hunter that I'm already working on right now, right?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No, I think you might beat me. I think this might be your realm. I think you might beat me, but still.
I think I think your light level is maybe light level 5, and I'm like 320 over here. So we got a little bit of an issue. I'll let you level up. I'll let you play some Crucible.
First of all, you can't if you can't beat me in cosplay, it would be
okay. If I couldn't,
it would be a problem for both of us.
Hey, maybe you have
Justin needs to take a reevaluation of his job.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, apparently I need to do cosplay now because
I know. It's true calling. There you go.
Amazing
You never know.
At this. Going over these photos and stuff, I'm like, man, dude, this is amazing. Your stuff is really good. It's really amazing.
Thank you. Blue, do you have final shout outs?
Blue doesn't get shout outs.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to do shout outs, but I can do announcements. We have obviously an Elder Scrolls chat going in the lore band, and we have created a mind map with all this information and actually a significant amount more on it. It's a pretty massive mind map even now. And so what I'm actually going to say is, if you're listening to this episode, if you manage to get through it without wanting to kill me for bludgeoning you in the face with all this information, let us know and jump into that chat and help us start building this map out, because I'm really kind of excited about seeing where this map can go and just seeing all the interconnections that we already have and seeing what other people can make of it. And it's just a really cool process. And it also there's already a couple people who are working really hard on it, and I want to help them get this thing kind of rolling. Plus, it's just really fun to kind of diversify our chats, and I like seeing the other chats get the attention that they deserve. So there's that. And then on a less serious note, we're doing a stream tomorrow. We're going to start doing this. I think we decided that we're going to do it. We're going to try to do it every last Thursday of every month. Justin, was that what we decided?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to be doing a stream, which you'll notice if you jump onto our Twitch stream, it has been flagged as mature. We are not making our podcast mature. It is actually more for our game streams, because as first-person shooter games, it can get a little sweaty sometimes in here. And then we're also going to start doing this thing called Guardians Against Humanity. Now, the basis of Guardians Against Humanity came about as a version of the Gift of Gaming stream that we did with the Dads of Destiny. So tomorrow we're going to be streaming on the Dads of Destiny's Twitch channel, and it's going to be at 10 p.m. So if you're listening to this and it's Thursday and it hasn't already happened, be sure to jump in, because it's going to be hilarious if the first version was anything to go off of. But what we do is we take Cards Against Humanity, we shuffle up the deck, and we play Cards Against Humanity with a full fire team while we're playing Crucible, and we involve the chat. And basically, it's a game of we vote and we just see what combination of cards we can come up with. We had a blast doing it, and I think we ran 3 hours. Anyways, this came about as a result of sleep deprivation and a bit of liquid courage. And it was so much fun that we're going to do it again. So, and then we're going to do it again every month. So that's going to start tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, be sure to jump over onto that. And with that, we're going to begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those of you in the chat for coming by to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our sites can also be found with our episode archives on www.focusfirechat.com. Thank you again to Mel for spending your evening with us. We hope to get you back on here as soon as possible. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
And please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any feedback, questions, or topics that you'd like to see us tackle in our new YouTube videos that we're still in the process of putting together, Lore 101 series and Justin's Spinfoil Corner. We're going to try to keep to the scheduled Wednesday night streams of the chat starting at approximately 10 p.m. Central, but if we do have any variations, we always will try to make sure that everyone knows through our Twitter account, which is @FocusFireChat. So, until next time, the Lore Band marches on.